That's a great thing about being a writer, is it doesn't cost anything to sit down at your computer and write something. And if it's a novel, that's it. I mean, obviously, if it's a script, you then rely on loads of other people and millions of pounds to turn it into something. But that's the great joy of being a writer, is you don't always have to wait for somebody to say, oh, here's some money, go and do some writing. You can write something and hope to sell it later.
Hello, I'm Laura Shavin, and this is The Offcut Straw, the show that looks inside a writer's bottom drawer to find the bits of work they never finished, had rejected, or couldn't quite find a home for. We bring them to life, hear the stories behind them, and learn how these random pieces of creativity paved the way to subsequent success. My guest this episode is Charlie Higson, who began his creative career in the early 80s as lead singer of a band named the Higsons. He then moved into comedy writing and performance, teaming up with Paul Whitehouse to write for the successful Harry Enfield sketch show before co-creating and performing in the BBC sketch series The Fast Show, which ran from 1994. Beyond sketch comedy, he worked in television drama, serving as writer, producer and occasional actor on Randall and Hopkirk Deceased in the early 2000s, and created the 2015 ITV series Jekyll Hyde. On the literary side, he authored 4 novels in the 1990s, and he gained wide recognition for writing the first 5 instalments of the authorised teenage-era James Bond novels, beginning with Silverfin in 2005 and ending with By Royal Command in 2008. He also created the hugely successful post-apocalyptic horror young adult series The Enemy, with 7 novels between 2009 and 2015. In 2018, he wrote a game book for the revived Fighting Fantasy series and returned to the Bond universe in 2023, this time featuring Bond as an adult with On His Majesty's Secret Service. More recently, he launched the podcast Willy Willy Harry Stee, exploring the history of the British monarchy, with a companion non-fiction book illustrated by Jim Moyer, also known as Vic Reeves. And at the time of broadcast, he's on a national tour of An Evening with the Fast Show, which celebrates 30 years since the series started. With such a busy and diverse career, there was an awful lot to talk about, and Charlie's offcuts and interview contained so much good stuff that rather than try and cram it in and cut it down, I've decided to release it as 2 episodes. And this is the first part, which began with me asking him what project, if any, he was writing on at the moment.
Yes, well, I am working on another book. It was commissioned some time ago. It's already late because my most recent book, my first non-fiction history book, consumed my life and took over my life in a way that I hadn't quite taken on board the amount of work it takes to do a non-fiction. It's much easier to just make stuff up and not have to do any research. It just comes off the top of your head. Although, of course, that does rely on you being able to squeeze things out of your brain. Yes, so the other thing I am working on is a new adult James Bond novel.
Ah, is that to follow on from the 2023 one with on
yes,
His Majesty's...
On His Majesty's Secret Service, yes, which went down very well. And I sort of initially work with the Fleming estate, and we developed an idea for a novel. And yes, they went out and sold it. And that is going to be out kind of September 2026. And I thought I could write it in parallel, in conjunction with doing the history book. I thought, well, I could do fiction in the morning and non-fiction in the afternoon, or the other way around. But the history book was so much work, researching it and structuring it and wrestling it into a narrative, that it was just my brain. I was just too exhausted. And it's much easier. I found, I'm 67 now. When I was younger, I could quite easily work on 3 things at once and just flit about, and I had the energy for that. I do find that a little bit harder now, getting the concentration. And of course, there's all the other things in life that come in and distract you, and things that you have to do. There's a great story about James Cameron,
The film director,
and obviously also screenwriter, that he had 3 scripts to work on when he was a lot younger. And he basically shut himself away in a hotel where nobody could get to him. And now I think he has himself said he had not necessarily a suitcase full, but quite a lot of drugs to keep him going, and room service. And he set up at 3 separate tables, 3 different typewriters. And he would hammer away at one script until he could do no more. Then he would refresh himself and move to the next table and carry on that one. And by the time he came out of the hotel, he had The Terminator, Rambo, and Aliens.
No.
Well, I think I've probably slightly embellished, but he was certainly working on those 3 things at the same time, yeah. And you can do that when you're young, but, then when he was older, it took him like 20 years or something to write Avatar, and it was crap.
Well, let's kick off with your first offcut now. Can you tell us, please, what it's called, what genre it was written for, and when it was written?
This is Cheese Shop, and it's a comedy script I wrote for Harry Enfield's spoof history of BBC Two, which was called The Story of the Twos, back in 2013.
Interior, cheese shop, day. Enter a customer.
Hello, I wish to register a complaint. Hello, miss?
What do you mean, miss? Mister!
I'm sorry, I have a cold. I wish to make a complaint.
We're closing for lunch.
Never mind that, my lad. I wish to complain about this cheese what I purchased not half an hour ago from this very boutique.
Oh, yes, the Norwegian blue. What's wrong with it?
I'll tell you what's wrong with it, my lad. It's gone off. That's what's wrong with it.
No, it's ripe.
Look, matey, I know an off cheese when I see one, and I'm looking at one right now.
No, it's not off. It's ripe. Remarkable cheese, the Norwegian blue, isn't it? Eh? Beautiful veining.
The veining don't enter into it. It's gone off.
No. It's perfectly ripe. Smell the aroma. Beautiful aroma, very pungent.
I'll give you pungent, sonny. Its pungentness is verging on the emetic.
He unwraps the cheese and thrusts it in the owner's face. He winces, recoils and gags.
Oh, delicious. Perfectly ripe. A good cheese should make you want to gag, sir. It's a sign of maturity.
He throws up in a bucket.
You did more than gag, my good man. You just threw up in a bucket.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did. I saw you.
I was clearing my throat. That's a lovely bit of cheese.
Ah, now look, mate. I've definitely had enough of this. This cheese is definitely off, and when I purchased it not half an hour ago, you assured me that its uniquely eye-watering aroma was due to it being fresh out of a cow's underbelly.
Well, the wrappings made it sweat a bit, that's all. You need to get it on a cheese board.
Get it on a cheese board? What kind of talk is that? If I take it out of its wrapping, it'll run all over the place like a toxic spill.
The Norwegian blue is famous for its resemblance to a toxic spill.
Look, I took the liberty of examining this cheese when I got it home, and I can assure you it's past its sell-by date. It's bleeding off. It's rank, rotten to the core. Its metabolic processes are now history. It is beyond putrid. It is decrepit, atrophied, unsavoury, decomposed, mouldering, high. It smells like the shithouse door on a tuna boat. It is giving me the wiggins. It is, in short, off. This is an off cheese.
Well, I'd better replace it then.
He takes a quick peek behind the counter.
Sorry, Squire, I've had a look round the back of the shop and we're right out of cheese.
I see. I get the picture.
I got a parrot.
Ha ha ha. So those who are in the comedy know will probably recognise that being an amalgamation of the dead parrot and cheese shop sketches from Monty Python's Flying Circus. Very clever. Well done.
Well, it was fun doing that. It was a fun sort of technical exercise because, the style of Monty Python is so strong. It is easy. Well, not easy, but it is a fun challenge to kind of write in that.
Well, it's very recognisable.
Yes. And Harry didn't use it in the end. And in fact, I was going to work on the whole series with him, but something came up and I had to go away and do something else. So I didn't. And Harry slightly took the series in a different direction to how we had originally discussed it. It was less sort of parodying.
It was a fantastic programme, though.
Yes, it was great. There was a lot of
some
really
nasty
good
stuff on there. I loved it. Some really cutting, evil stuff. But you wouldn't work on that in the end because you were doing something else.
Yes, and it was always a problem because I worked a lot with Harry, obviously in his first TV sketch show, and then we parted company because we both had quite strong personalities, and we would often pull in different directions. And Harry just thought in the end, well, this is my show, so I'm in charge. Charlie can go and do something else.
Ah.
But Paul, you see, Paul is very good in writing partnerships. It's like a marriage. You both have to bring something different to it. There's no point you both being the same and being able to do the same thing. And in a writing partnership, you tend to have one of the pair who kind of wanders around the room throwing out ideas and going into routines and just doing crazy stuff. And then the other is the one who sits at the computer or typewriter, as it used to be, kind of writing it down and structuring it and thinking, how do I make that into a sketch? Oh, I use that bit and put it with that. And so you have the sort of, it's the left hand and the right hand of the piano. So the left hand is sort of doing all the structure and the right hand is doing all the fancy stuff.
So which one are you?
I am very much left hand. I mean, obviously, coming up with, you're both coming up with funny ideas, but I tend to be the one who always was at the computer.
Is that with both of them? Is that with Paul and Harry?
Well, that's the thing, is Paul is very much right hand, and when he's with Harry, Harry is left hand and he's right hand. So Harry is the one who's sort of scratching his head and worrying about things, and Paul is just saying, no, this is funny, let's do this, let's do that. So once there were three of us, there were two left-handers and one right-hand. If I'd been right-hand, would have been different because I could have just been throwing out ideas and not worrying about anything else. But I tend to sort of get in and worry about stuff.
Now, in public recognition terms, you're probably most well known for the TV sketch show The Fast Show as a writer and a performer. Now, apart from enjoying the huge success, running on and off for like 20 years or so, including specials, the show is notable for being different from sketch shows that went before, in that an episode would have a lot more sketches, which would be much shorter than the norm, and a lot of the comedy came down to recognise characters and their punchlines. How did that format come about? Was it a deliberate decision?
It was, yes, because there were several factors. One is that Paul Whitehouse and myself, had been working on Harry's sketch show at the Harry Enfield television programme. And the first stuff we'd written with Harry was character stuff, doing Stavros, and then we all created Loads of Money together. And Paul and I both really loved character comedy. That was, probably our favourite type of TV comedy. And we'd grown up on things like Dick Emery, Benny Hill, Monty Python, although Monty Python, well, they did have some recurring characters, but yeah. And I guess it sort of goes back to the British music hall tradition of people creating your stage persona and having your character. So we loved doing that. So we did that with Harry, but we didn't want to be stuck as Harry Enfield's writers forever. We wanted to do our own stuff, but we knew if we were going to do another character-based sketch show, it couldn't be exactly the same as Harry's, but that would be our template because Harry had the same influences that we did. So we were always looking for a way, because we collected material which for one reason or another wasn't right for Harry. Either there was a thing that Paul could do, but there was no role for Harry, or he just didn't think it was funny. So we collected quite a lot of material, and we were thinking, well, how do we do this? We wanted it to be a team show, not just a star pairing as Harry and Paul had done. And the producer, absolutely brilliant comedy producer, the best around, Geoffrey Perkins, who we'd worked with on Harry's show and on Saturday Night Live. For the launch, I think, of the second series of Harry's sketch show, he cut together a sort of highlights reel to show off the new characters and some of the highlights. And Paul and I said to him, oh, no, you need to show a whole sketches or a whole episode because the characters won't work if you're just showing one or two lines. And he said, no, it works really well, actually. You'd be surprised. And he showed it. And Paul and I, watching it, we simultaneously had a light bulb moment and said, what if we tried to do a whole show like this that was just the highlights? Just do the funny stuff and cut out all the rest. Because, there'd been shows like The Two Ronnies, were very funny and enormously popular, but some of their sketches were like 8 minutes long. And it was that old school writing thing where it was building up towards a punchline. Obviously, you have fun along the way, and you're laboriously grinding towards the payoff, and you're usually there a couple of minutes before the sketch ends, and you're just waiting for them to catch up with you. So we thought, no, let's keep things short. Let's just have the characters come on and do what it is that makes them funny. And actually, if you keep it short enough, the sketch is its own punchline, as it were. You don't have to build up towards the hey, that's what the joke is. You're just enjoying being with the characters and what they're doing. Yeah, obviously you need to know when things end. But if you keep it short enough, I mean, like Mark Williams had the character Jessie, who comes out of a shed. and says, "This week I have been mostly eating tiramisalata," and goes back in the shed. As I say, it's kind of the essence of a joke distilled to absolutely, well, nothing really. So the character coming out is the punchline in a way. So we thought, yeah, if you keep it quick and keep it light on its feet, you can move on quickly and people won't get bored. And also, the first series went out in 94. This was, by then, videos were popular and home taping people were doing. DVDs were coming out on the market. And we realised that people were consuming television differently. You were able to go back and look at it again. When Paul and I were growing up, you'd see a Monty Python episode and you'd try and remember it so that you could do it the next day at school, because it might be another year before you saw it again, if ever. You couldn't guarantee things would be repeated. But we realised by the 90s that people could watch things over and over again, and people were. And our kind of imaginary audience was a band on a touring bus. And the show was very popular with musicians who, after a gig, they say, "I'll put some of the Fast Show on." And it's short and fast, and you're not overstaying your welcome, and you can watch things over and over again because you're not explaining everything all in one hit. Sometimes you might watch a character 3 or 4 times before you sort of twig, all right, okay, that's what this is all about. So it was designed for repeat viewing. It was almost as if we anticipated YouTube. But, it's very popular on there because that's sort of how it was designed. And also, digital editing was coming in. When we did the first series, we started on tape and then moved over to digital. And with digital editing, you can deal with lots of small bits and pieces much easier and move things around. Because we would be shuffling sketches over a whole 6, 7, 8 episode series and thinking, well, that sketch goes well with that. Oh, but we've got too much of this performer here, or this character's too much. We need to move that there. But that means we've got to move that. With digital, you can do all that. It's really easy. With tape, it was a nightmare. So it was technology, it was the way viewing habits were changing, and it was a desire to do something different to Harry's.
Right. Well, time for another off-cut now. Tell us about this one.
Right, this is The Frost Child, which is a short story that I started in, I think, about 1988, and I haven't quite finished it yet.
It wasn't snowing. It hadn't snowed at all this winter, but the frost and the whiteness of the fog reminded him of Courchevel, the Alps coated in white. Nearly a year ago it was now, and still vivid. It would always be vivid. Whenever it was cold, whenever it snowed, whenever they showed skiing on the TV, he'd remember. Of course, he'd never actually go skiing again himself, the thing he'd loved doing most in the world. He could picture Amy now, the person he loved above all else. Yes, he had to accept that. Loved more than Kate. He tried not to think about Amy for the whole journey, but the fog ahead was like a blank page, and her picture kept drawing itself across it. There wasn't anything else to look at. He sees her now, how she was, standing in the cottage door, the wreath still up from Christmas. She likes it so much she's begged them not to take it down, though it's looking rather tatty. She's wrapped up against the cold and wearing the new bobble hat that Kate gave her for Christmas, and she looks utterly, utterly miserable. "Please don't go, Daddy. Do you have to go?" "Yes, Amy dear, we've told you. You're a big girl now. It'll be fun for you, an adventure, having the run of the cottage." "I don't want to run round the cottage. I don't want to be alone." "Yes, well, you won't be alone, will you, darling?" Kate says briskly. "Claudia will be here. You're too young to come skiing. It'll be dangerous for you. We'll be back before you know it." And once again, Kate goes over the instructions with Claudia. If it weren't for Claudia, they wouldn't be going at all. The last girl they had been completely hopeless, more work than if they hadn't had a nanny at all. But Claudia's great, totally confident and competent. But she looks so young, almost a child herself, so small, but competent. She's a treasure. Phil shivered. It had been on this road that it had happened. No, that wasn't right. Claudia wouldn't have come this way. The hospital was the other way, wasn't it? Up through the woods and over the ridge? Stop it. You know you must never think about that. You can't change what happened to Amy. But it was impossible. Her thin, sweet voice, her face, they're everywhere. As they get into the car that last time, Amy runs down and presses her face against the window. "Can't you take me with you?" "No," Kate snaps. "Now you've been told, so just behave yourself." Amy opens her mouth wide and screws her eyes shut and begins to wail. Phil winds the window down and tries to touch her, but she pulls away. "No," she shrieks, "you don't love me." Phil feels like he's been kicked in the gut. But Kate just laughs. "Don't be a silly," she says, and Amy, embarrassed, looks at her feet. Now Claudia comes over and gently but firmly leads Amy back to the cottage. "Why can't she understand that she can't come?" Kate says as they drive off. Phil says nothing, because the thing is, he can't understand either.
This was unfinished, you said.
Yeah, that was like a Sunday afternoon with Radio 4 on, sitting by the fire in December. Yes, well, it was finished, but I never liked the original ending.
Oh, what was the original ending?
Well, in the original ending, I mean, you could tell from that reading, it's about a husband and wife who've lost a child. And you can tell from that reason that the wife appears to be unsympathetic. And in the original end of the story, she was. But, and I'm still working it because I want her to actually, that all the time she has known more and has been trying to protect her husband.
Oh, so this is really still ongoing. You weren't being flippant.
Yes. Then that's why I haven't published it. I mean, I wrote it. My wife's family have a little cottage down in Wales, and we went down there pre-kids for New Year's Eve with a bunch of friends, and somebody said, "Oh, Charlie, why don't you write some kind of spooky story that you can read out?" Because it's quite a spooky, isolated cottage. So I did. I wrote this story quite quickly, and
this was in 1988.
It was around about that time. Yes, but I wrote it on an old Amstrad, so I can't. I thought I'd lost the story, but my archive went to my old university, UEA, and it turned up in a bunch of old papers. And they said, "Oh, we found this. What is it?" I thought, "Oh, amazing." So I've been working on it since. And yeah, the story went down very well, but I thought I could do a better and more interesting ending.
The thing is, it's still a story rather than, say, a novel.
Yes. It's a short story. I mean, it could be adapted into a sort of one of those BBC ghost story for Christmas type things, because it is a ghost story. I mean, the other thing actually was when I reread it again, because the central conceit in it is that there was this fairy tale that the wife read as a child called The Frost Child, which is about a sort of evil kid that if it touches you, it turns you to ice. And of course, since writing the story, Frozen has become a big thing. And I'm reading it, I'm thinking, oh my God, actually, this is the same story as Frozen. I need to change that, or at least have the characters acknowledge, well, that's a bit like the Frozen. So yeah, there's a few things to sort out. But I return to it now and then and kind of tinker with it, because it has got a nice atmosphere and it is quite spooky.
Well, this is the earliest piece of writing you gave me. So tell me about your childhood. Where did you grow up? Did you come from a creative family? Where's all this writing-y, acting-y stuff come from?
I had a very ordinary sort of home counties upbringing. I was born in Somerset, but then I grew up in first Sussex near Crawley, and then in Kent down near Sevenoaks. My father was an accountant who then became a management consultant, classic commuter. He would set off in the morning with his bowler hat.
Did he have a bowler hat?
Yeah, he did to start with, yes. I was born in 58, so yeah, in the late 60s into the 70s, and then he stopped wearing it. But yeah, my mother she did a bit of teaching, I guess what today would be called special needs. She'd go into schools and spend time with the kids who were special needs, as I say, they're called now. And she also did a bit of amateur dramatics, which was the closest we came to doing anything creative, really.
But not writing? No writers?
No, nothing. No. The best advice my father ever gave me, when I was 16, he said, "Look, you obviously enjoy writing and you're a good writer," because I'd been writing stuff since I was 10, little books and things. If I read a book I liked, I'd write sort of stories in that vein and draw little drawings and things. And yeah, I was writing sort of fantasy novels when I was a teenager. And he said, "Look, you're good at writing. You obviously enjoy it. It's a fantastic thing to do. You can do it all your life. It doesn't cost you anything. But whatever you do, make sure you get yourself a proper job, because you will never make any money as a writer." And the reason that was such good advice is because I was 16, I completely ignored everything that my father said to me. And I did the opposite of what is it. And I've never had a proper job. And I've been lucky enough, and I appreciate that I am very lucky, to have been able to make a living as a writer. Making things up. People pay me to do it.
Did you always want to be a writer?
I always enjoyed writing. I mean, but, as we were saying, I didn't know any writers. It wasn't anything...
It wasn't a tangible goal.
Yeah, and certainly, TV, I wouldn't have dreamt of going on TV. This was before media studies or anything like that. These felt like things that other people did. But I carried on doing it. I carried on writing novels, and then when I went to university, I wrote a couple of sort of student novels, shall we say. This was the sort of heyday of postmodernism, so unreadable novels. But I was using, I was quite interested in people like William Burroughs, who would use genre elements in a sort of cut-up way. So there'd be bits of sort of Western fiction or pirate fiction or science fiction in his books, all kind of jumbled up together. And I'd been doing stuff like that.
What did young Charles dream of being when he grew up?
Well, my sort of fantasy thing was I thought I would really love to make films.
So creative. You didn't want to be a train driver or an astronaut?
I always knew I was going to do something. No. It was always going to be creative. I loved art as well, so I thought I might be a painter. I might be a writer. I would love to make films. But again, I didn't know a way of doing that. But then at university, I carried on writing. So I was comfortable writing. I enjoyed writing. And I met Paul Whitehouse in Norwich at university in 1977. And this was pre... alternative comedy, so you wouldn't have dreamed of going out on stage or doing comedy, but you would form a band. So we formed a punk band together. So then I really got into music. That's the other thing I'd really liked doing was music and playing the piano and stuff. So I always knew I would do something creative. Yeah.
Well, appropriately now, tell us about your next offcut.
This is a pitch document that I knocked up quite quickly in 2016, and it's called Ghosts of Dead Rock Stars.
A hugely popular and successful rock star is backstage, getting ready for a monster comeback gig at the O2. It's not going well, however. He's wasted, edgy, arrogant, insecure, and losing it fast. He rows with his band, who seem to hate him. He rows with his gorgeous girlfriend over his infidelities. He rows with his long-term and long-suffering manager. He even rows with his chef and the guy selling merch. In short, he's a mess, and the gig is shaping up to be a disaster. In the end, he locks himself in his dressing room and refuses to talk to anyone. Things have taken their toll. Years of constant touring, late nights, a rootless existence, losing touch with family and friends, alcohol and drug abuse, meaningless sex with groupies, more money than he knows how to spend, have left him disillusioned and wrung out. He has lost his mojo, completely disillusioned with not just his own music, but all music. Nothing seems to matter to him anymore. His dark night of the soul now takes a turn for the worse. He swallows a gutful of sleeping pills and whiskey. In his semi-comatose state, he imagines, or perhaps it's for real, that he's visited by the ghosts of several dead rock stars. The likes of Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Louis Armstrong, Buddy Holly, Elvis, Billie Holiday, Cass Elliot, Mark Bolan, John Lennon, Bob Marley, Keith Moon. There are so many possibilities. Just like the ghosts in A Christmas Carol, or the angel in It's a Wonderful Life and the heavenly spirit guide in A Matter of Life and Death, he's taken on a tour. He has shown how his music has touched people's lives, how important it has been for them. The young girl brought out of a coma in hospital, all the couples brought together and starting families, depressed, suicidal teenagers who his music gave hope to. He's shown his past, his early days, playing in tiny clubs when he was so excited about music. He's shown the present, the fans in the auditorium waiting in intense anticipation for the gig. His fellow bandmates, yes, they moan about him and give him a hard time, but it's clear they do actually love and respect him and wouldn't be here at the O2 without him. He's also shown the future, all that he might achieve, coming to terms with his demons and settling down and starting a family of his own. The dead musicians also talk about their own lives. Those that died young, for instance, lament what might have been, all they might have achieved, how none of them really meant to end it all. Some of the ghosts will be funny, some moving, some inspirational. Jimi Hendrix, for instance, could keep banging on about the ridiculously pompous rock opera he was planning to write. And it's a great opportunity for some fun cameos.
This was a pitch for a TV series. Is that right?
No, it was for a film.
Oh, it was for a film. Right. It sounds very
Yeah,
much like a
because,
cross between It's a Wonderful Life and Channel 4 Star Stories. How far did it get?
Yes, it didn't get very far at all. I put it together quite quickly because a friend of mine, who I also met at university, Dave Cummings, who was in the band with me and Paul, and ended up as a commotion with Lloyd Cole and as part of Delamitri. And somebody had mentioned to him that someone was wanting to do some kind of music-based, rock-based project, and do we have any ideas? So I sort of came up with that, and the idea was if they bit, that Dave and I would write it together. And they said, oh no, that's not what we're looking for.
Oh.
And I didn't do anything much with it because I was doing other stuff. Well, listening to it there, it does sound like a really good idea, actually.
It is,
and,
yes.
and a way of looking at music, because I was in two bands when I was younger, and I was a professional singer for 6 years, and I probably know more people in the music who make music than who do comedy. Right up to good friends with Paul McCartney's musical director. So I have a lot of contacts with that world, and sort of thought it could be a really good idea, and it sort of touches on that idea of the 27 Club, that so many musicians apparently died when they were 27, but actually it's a tiny fraction. But if you just concentrate on them, it looks like that's when they all died, which is why I put in people like Louis Armstrong, I think. Also, it was quite a lot of fun, and I thought it was a different way of looking at how important music is for people. I mean, this was quite interesting digging out all this stuff for this podcast. I mean, what I sent you is a fraction of what I got. Over the years, you throw stuff out there. Some of it you paid for, some of it you just develop yourself. And you see what sticks, and something else. At the time, I got commissioned to do something else, so that ended up in the bottom drawer, as it's called. But going through it all again, I'm thinking, that's actually quite good. Maybe I should try and do some more.
Yes, I think you should. I mean, you've now got a fair amount of heft behind you. You should be able to generate... You can imagine being a big Christmas special film, or Netflix or Amazon, a big production. Yeah. I definitely can see that. I was very surprised that didn't get anywhere. But if you were busy doing other things, that makes sense, I suppose. So you were in a band, you were in two bands, and when you say you were a professional singer for 6 years, was that when you were in a band, or were you a professional singer anyway?
Yes, it was. No. So the first band was a student punk band with Paul and Dave called the Right Hand Lovers. And in true punk style, we burned brightly and burnt ourselves out. Within a year, we'd come and gone. So then I formed another band because Paul, other than Dave, everyone else in the band was kicked out of university. So then I started another band with a fresh intake of students, which ended up being called the Higsons. And that I carried on doing after university for 6 years.
And why did it all end, the band thing?
Many factors. One was that the bass player and I started doing decorating when we weren't on tour as a way to actually make some money, because...
You did decorating with Paul Whitehouse?
Well, that was later on. First of all, it was with Colin Williams, the bass player, because we didn't make any money in the band. When we were on tour, it was fine because we'd be given free sandwiches and beer. But between touring, there was no income. So we started doing decorating, and we were pretty good at it. We worked well together, and we were living in London by this point, and there is no shortage of houses to decorate in London. And we realised that the band was getting in the way of our decorating. So we thought, well, if we stick to just the decorating, then we make quite a good living, which we did. But also, I'd been doing it for 6 years. I was feeling I was starting to get too old for it. And really, in my heart of hearts, I completely knew that I was not cut out to be a rock star, to take it to the next level. To do that, a lead singer has to believe in themselves as being God, as being a messiah. You've got to go out on stage at a stadium and stick your hands in the air and put them together and expect 10,000 people to clap along with you. It requires a certain level of ego and self-belief and belief in what you're doing there. And you do have to behave as I am a rock star. And I could never do that. We always had too much sort of self-deprecating humour. So we were great at a club level and at the sort of medium-sized venues. But I knew that really I didn't have what it took to take it to the next level. Because this was, by now we're in the sort of second half of the 80s, and music was changing. Most of the places that the small music venues we've been able to play at were all stopping having live bands and just going over to DJs. And some of the bands who'd been doing stuff like we had did manage to kind of reinvent themselves as club bands, like someone like The Farm, for instance. And we thought, do we want to do that? And I thought, actually, you know what? I don't think I really want to be doing this for the rest of my life. It's not. Whilst I've had a great time doing it, I thought I've had enough of it now. I want to do other things, and particularly writing. So, yeah, we became full-time decorators, and then Paul and I started writing together.
OK, let's move on to the next offcut now. Can you tell us about this one, please?
All right. This is King Bullet, which is a film script from 2001.
Interior, Range Rover, dawn. Cosmo and Kath are asleep. Danny is driving, staring dead ahead. Theda leans forward in her seat to talk to him.
You should have left me.
I was going to, but right now you're all I've got.
Me and a bag full of money. What did Tom have all that money in the house for anyway?
Your birthday present.
How do you mean?
He was buying you a painting off the Russians.
An icon?
Yeah.
Tom was doing that for me?
Yeah. Look, I'm sorry to fuck up your birthday party like that. It was nothing personal.
I can't believe he was buying me an icon. We saw some on holiday. I told him I thought they were beautiful. He remembered.
Rublev smuggled it out of Russia.
Jesus, Danny, you haven't got a chance.
He's just a man. An old man. He's past it.
Being young's not so fantastic.
Yeah, but don't you ever think about it? What it used to be like? Don't you ever think about, a young man's body? A young man's stamina?
You haven't got a chance.
I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't have run. Maybe we should have stayed to fight. He doesn't frighten me.
He frightens me. Still now, after 30 years. Sometimes he can look at you and he knows.
Is that why you've stayed with him? Because you're frightened of what he'd do if you left?
I've stayed with him because I love him. And in his way, he loves me.
You sure of that, are you?
Long time ago, I found out he'd been cheating on me. A German girl singer, Anneliese. He had a kid by her and everything. Well, I hit the roof, didn't I? We'd not been married long, and it looked like it was all over, but he promised me he was finished with her, and she didn't mean nothing to him. Said he'd never see her again.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And he proved it. He used to have a boat. Big motor launch, He and the lads used to stock up with beer and that and go out fishing. One day, they all went out with Anneliese. And when they came back, she wasn't with them.
Jesus.
When Tom fixes something, he fixes it. Like our Paula's husband.
Paula?
Our daughter. She married a guy called Antonio. Best looking bloke you ever saw. Well, one day, same old story, Tom finds out he's been playing away from home. He burned his face off with a blowtorch. Father of our grandchildren. Didn't kill him, but I guess Antonio couldn't live with it. After 3 months in hospital, he jumped off the roof. Like I said, Danny, you haven't got a chance.
That's a cheery little story, isn't it?
Yes, tell us about this story. It's quite violent.
Yeah, it is. It's a British gangster story. I mainly wrote it because I had a new computer and new software.
Final Draft or something?
Well, would it possibly Final Draft? I can't remember when that kind of launched. And I wanted to practice writing a full-length script. And I had an idea for a story. This was sort of, I guess the 90s had been the heyday for the sort of British gangster movie. So I thought I'd have a go at writing something in that style. And I'm not sure I ever showed it to anyone, actually, when I'd finished it. I can't remember. So it was mainly, as I say, it was a technical exercise.
Did you read through it this time before you sent it to me?
No, I read a bit of it just to check that it wasn't complete rubbish. Yeah, it'd be interesting to go back and revisit it. But yeah, it's about an ageing British gangster. And in my mind at the time, I was thinking of Michael Caine, who's living in a proper gangster's mansion out in Essex. with his younger wife. She's not like a 20-year-old, but she's younger than him. And this guy comes in and robs him and takes his wife hostage. And that's the two that are speaking in the car. And they kind of, they end up falling in love, and the main man comes after them. And yeah, there's a lot of violence and killing and shooting. I wrote, in the early 90s, I wrote 4 crime novels. I was a big fan, or still am a big fan, of American kind of hard-boiled crime writing, but also the pulp writers, really interesting writers of the 50s, 60s and 70s, people like Jim Thompson, who is my all-time favourite writer. And I've always liked trying to write that sort of thing that's a bit sort of twisted at its core.
Right. And that's what this was. This was a film version of something like that, you'd say?
Yeah, it was a bit of the sort of pulp fiction type of writing, a bit of the British gangster fiction. I think probably by the time I'd finished it, there was a feeling like we'd had enough of British gangster films and nobody was going to be that interested in making another one. But I always keep thinking, well, when I've got time, I'll go back and look at these and see which ones to develop.
Right. But this one never had an audience until now.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, I think I showed it to Mark Mylod, who was who we worked with on the Fast Show and ended up directing it. And then I worked with him, made a series of Randall Hopkirk Deceased with Vic and Bob. And Mark then went off to Hollywood, and he now does things like Game of Thrones. He was the lead director on Succession, and he's now overdoing the new Harry Potter TV series. Yeah. So I think I showed it to him, and he found some of the bits of it funny, but I think he would have preferred if I'd written a comedy. I mean, there is elements of comedy in it, but then it sort of turns serious. So I like that juxtaposition of something's quite funny and then it turns really dark.
Now, you'd recently finished or had a break from the Fast Show at this point. It's difficult for me to have a timeline. Like you say, you do a lot of things at the same time, so it's difficult to know what you were actually working on, because the dates that I can have access to are publication dates or broadcast dates, so don't know what you were actually doing. But I think you were also working on other TV projects, but none of them were comedy, or at least not sort of pure comedy, sketch comedy like the Fast Show. Were you kind of comedied out at that point? Did you had enough of that format?
Well, writing sketch shows it burns through a huge amount of material, particularly on the Fast Show, where we were trying to keep things as short as possible. So you're having to write, 30 mini dramas an episode. And it's got to be funny, and the characters have got to work, and there's got to be a point to it. And it's quite tiring. So inevitably, you kind of think, well, I like to do something a bit different to comedy, because then, use a different part of the brain and flex some other muscles. And that can make it easier for you to then go back and write more sketch comedy. So, there are two things I'd always wanted to do. One was I loved, growing up in the 60s, I loved all those fantastical TV shows that people used to make at the time. Things like The Prisoner, The Avengers, The Champions, Adam Adamant. There were loads of them. And these were big mainstream shows, a lot of them made by ITV. And that's what people loved watching. And of course, there was all the American stuff coming in, Star Trek or whatever. And that's what I really loved, that sort of slightly fantastical TV drama, which it stopped in the 70s. It was killed by kitchen sink drama. And everything started to be, it was all about gritty realism, which is fine, but it meant that everything was judged on how realistic it was. And we stopped making shows. We still kept importing all the American ones, which were very popular. But if you tried to do anything like that in British TV, people would say, well, this is for kids, isn't it? It's fantasy. So it died out. So when I had the opportunity to do a remake of Randall Hopkirk Deceased, which was another of those ATV shows from the 60s and 70s, I thought, brilliant. That would be a lot of fun to do. And everybody, that we got involved in it thought the same. We had a fantastic lineup of actors and designer, cinematographer, whatever, because they said, we never get a chance to do this sort of thing. This is so much fun. But inevitably it goes out and people say, oh, isn't this a kid's thing? One of them's a ghost. So people didn't get it. So I was quite pleased, actually, that, it's interesting because the first episode got 10.5 million viewers, which is pretty phenomenal. But unfortunately, it kind of dropped from week to week over the two series, and we ended up around about kind of 4 million. So that trajectory was going in the wrong direction. Perhaps if we'd pushed through and been able to get a third series, we might have been able to reverse a trend, but it didn't happen. But then, not long after that, Russell Davies rebooted Doctor Who and managed to do, to bring back a sense of fun and fantasy and science fiction. But what he was really clever at doing was mixing fantasy and rooting that in solid family drama with Billy Piper and her family and all that sort of story. And he was really clever about that. But what I found very gratifying is that a lot of people who I'd worked with on Randall Hopkirk ended up working on that. So Murray Gold, who did the music for us, did the music for Doctor Who. David Tennant, who had starred in our first episode, ended up as Doctor Who. Writers like Gareth Roberts went on from there. Mark Gatiss from the League of Gentlemen had worked on Randall Hopkirk. So, I was thinking, well, Russell is coming really from the same sort of place as I am, and hats off to him for making it successful.
And it did change the TV landscape.
Well, it didn't. I thought, great, now we'll be having more fantasy shows and maybe some stuff for adults, but it didn't happen. It was, no, you can do that in Doctor Who because that's a special thing, but don't try and do it anywhere else. But through I suppose Charlie Brooker with Black Mirror has done something much more interesting. But it's really through the streamers that now they are less focused on kitchen sink dramas.
Very much less, and very much more focused on fantasy.
But you look at drama on TV. There's some great stuff, but it's cop shows, it's doctors, it's missing children.
Oh well. Time for another off-cut now. What have we got?
Right, this is a pilot TV script that I developed in 2018 for a series about the young Winston Churchill.
Interior, Maudie's rooms, night. A sad and dingy little flat, prettified with a few touching personal items. There's an iron bedstead and not much else in the way of furniture. The door opens and Maudie drags Winston in, laughing. He stops laughing when the full realisation of where he is sinks in. Maudie lights a lamp and goes to kiss him. We can see her clearly for the first time. She's in her late 30s, about the same age as his mother. He moves away from her, not because of her age, but because he's embarrassed and unsure of himself. He picks up a book from a side table as a distraction, doesn't really look to see what it is. He's young and drunk and naive and earnest.
It was thrilling tonight, speaking out like that. It was more potent than any champagne.
He goes to say her name, but realises he doesn't know it.
Maudie.
Maudie.
And what do I call you?
Do you mind if I... Would you be offended if I didn't say? My father is... well...
Who am I ever going to tell?
At school, they used to call me Copperknob.
Maudie raises an eyebrow.
My hair?
Oh, right.
Maudie makes her move and kisses him. He's somewhat stunned. It's not unpleasant, but he doesn't know what to do. Maudie touches his lips with her fingertips.
So come on then, Copperknob. What do you want?
What does any young man want?
I can tell you that in one sentence.
A man wants 3 things. He wants money, he wants excitement, and he wants to make his mark. To be someone.
That's a longer sentence than mine was going to be.
Maudie leans in on him, but Winston breaks away and circles the room, reciting verse in mock heroic style.
And then out spoke brave Horatius, the captain of the gate. To every man upon this earth, death cometh soon or late, and how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods?
Exterior, London, Soho courtyard, night. It's still night, though there's a glimmer of early morning light in the sky. Lord Dillon's moving along the balcony, buttoning his shirt and struggling into his jacket. He calls out, trying not to make too much noise about it.
Winston? Winston!
Winston appears at Maudie's door, shy and embarrassed, still in his shirt and tie.
Dillon!
Come along, Cinderella. It's way past midnight. If we don't look lively, the milk train will leave without us and we'll be missed at barracks. Don't want you done for dereliction of duty, do we?
Oh, Lord, I lost all track of time. I'm not quite sure of the etiquette.
Dillon reaches for his wallet and nods to Winston to get a move on. As Winston ducks back through the door, Maudie comes out still fully clothed. Dillon slips her some money. She looks at it ruefully before folding it up.
I'm not sure I earned that. All he did was talk about himself all night.
Then you indulged him in his favourite pastime.
Winston comes back out, putting on his jacket.
I'll be seeing you then, copper knob.
Yes. Good morning to you.
Dylan is intrigued by this little exchange.
Now, this seems like an excellent idea. How come this didn't get snapped up instantly?
Well, it's a tricky one. I mean, I worked on this for a long time with a fantastic production company with proper backing. So, and yeah, I worked out, I wrote a pilot and worked out a whole series. And it is the young life of young Winston. And the thing that really I thought, actually, yeah, this could be interesting, is they showed me this fantastic photograph of him. This was when he was at Sandringham, I think, training to be an officer. And there's a photograph of him in his uniform. And he must be about 20. And, he's young and handsome and dashing. And I thought, we never really see this side of Winston. We forget. He was a young man. He was a Victorian man. And, we only think of him as he was really in the Second World War. And I thought, well, that's fascinating to try and show that side of him. And I mean, at that instant in the scene, that's based on something that actually happened, that he and the officers came down to London and had a sort of, got drunk in a theatre and had a sort of mini sort of riot. But also then he went off and he was a war correspondent in Cuba. There was a Cuban War of Independence broke out. And just thought, well, this is really interesting to look at, the makings of the man. Unfortunately, I think there were two reasons. One, in the original way that I developed the series, I tried to put too much in. It would have been way too expensive because it followed him from there through to being out in India and fighting in the Northwest frontier. And in actual fact, towards the end, before we stopped working on it, we were scaling it back and it was just going to be about his time in Cuba, which is what I should have done in the first place. So that was one problem, I think it put people off the scope of it. And the other thing was the fact that it is Winston Churchill, because people are very much reassessing him. And young people certainly don't want anything to do with him. So he's quite a divisive figure. On one hand, you have sort of certain members of society and the establishment who are saying, oh, Churchill was a great, great man who saved us from Hitler. And then you've got, and it's often younger people saying, well, no, actually he was a terrible man. He was involved in exacerbating the famine in India. And he said some quite racist things. So it's kind of like, I mean, the interesting thing about this was trying to show him before all that, when he was just a young man finding his way in the world. But I think a lot of people thought, I don't know, I want to keep away. It's a touchy subject.
But surely that would mean that anything set in, more than sort of 60, 70 years ago, if it's historically in any way accurate, is going to feature people who would have insulted the sensibilities of people today. Surely there's a kind of understanding. Maybe you don't put those bits of dialogue in.
Yeah, but it's a tricky one because I think he's controversial and he splits so many people that, yeah, you could see that as, well, this would be a really interesting thing to explore. Or B, you could say, no, it's too controversial. We're going to get into a lot of hot water on this from both sides of the camp, because the sort of traditionalists will say, well, you can't be showing Churchill doing this. This is terrible. And then the other side is saying, well, you're whitewashing him or whatever. So I don't know. If other things hadn't taken over, we might have been able to pursue it more. But we sort of felt we'd gone about as far as we could with it. And yes, I wish actually from the start I'd scaled it back and just concentrated on what he was doing in Cuba.
And you couldn't do that? I mean, I know you're busy right now, but you...
Well, could do, yeah. I mean, if someone else would be interested in a series of Winston Churchill, then I've got all you need. You have to choose, which thing am I going to push now? And as I say, as I've got older, I found I can't work on so many things at once. And, you have to go with where you get a sense of what Netflix are looking for. The likes of well, I'd use them as an example of a streamer. They're not really looking for a series about young Winston Churchill. They want a series about the Prime Minister's husband being taken hostage.
But history is your thing, though. I mean, you have, you've got a history podcast called Willy Willy Harry Stee.
Yes.
Based on the mnemonic rhyme for remembering kings and queens of England that I was taught at school. So,
did you learn it?
Yeah, Willy Willy Harry Stee. Oh, no, how embarrassing.
Harry, Dick, John, Harry 3.
Oh, I did know it and now I've forgotten.
That's great, because, I mean, so many people didn't. So it's nice when you meet someone who did.
Even though she can't remember a single word beyond Stee. Never mind. So, yes, obviously that's why you called it that. And, of course, you've got your book coming out, which is also based on that. Does it cover the whole of British monarchy from the first Willie of the Willy Harry Stee?
Yeah, it's pretty much a sort of history of England over the last 1,000 years from 1066 onwards. Yeah, it's a narrative history about this extraordinary dysfunctional family, and it's a family saga. You can follow it from one generation to the next, from William all the way down to King Charles III. It's the same family. I mean, it takes some mad detours and it gets a bit tangled up here and there, but it's amazing that you can follow that. And it's a great way of using that story as a lens through which to look at our history in a way it's a washing line to hang it all on. And so many people know little bits of English history, and they're not quite sure how it fits together and how one monarch is related to another. So it's really for those people who know a bit and want to know a bit more.
And the podcast is an episode or two per king, queen?
Yes, that was the idea. I thought would lend itself to a great narrative podcast. And then once I had got to Charles, I've gone back and I'm going over the same story again, but looking at other people along the way.
Now, in my Facebook feed, I often get adverts for you and Vic Reeves or Jim Moyer doing live shows based on this. Is it based on the same thing, the same Willy Harry Stee?
Yeah, Jim has done the illustrations for the book. So, yeah, we've done a couple of events together. We're hoping to do some more. But it felt like, because Jim and I worked together a lot back in the late 80s and through the 90s. I worked on a lot of Jim and Bob's comedy shows. I did live stuff with them before they were on the TV. And there was a lot of crossover between what they were doing and what Paul and I were doing. Paul, obviously, playing one of Slade on their show. And Bob actually wrote quite a lot for the Fast Show as well.
Oh, did he?
So, yeah, he wrote all the filthy lines for Swiss Toni. So it felt right that because they've left us and have buggered off our partners, Jim and I, our partners, have gone fishing together.
Oh, yes,
it felt right.
Of course,
that,
I hadn't put those two together.
Yeah, that Jim and I should work on our own project.
Yeah,
so that's
stuff
been
them.
A lot of fun. Yeah.
And there we leave it for part one. Listen to the next episode to hear the rest of my interview with Charlie and some more offcuts that include a horror version of Beauty and the Beast, a potential Indian James Bond, and a Doctor Who episode that delves into the murky world of alternative computer games. The Offcut Straw was devised and presented by me, Laura Shavin, with special thanks to this week's guest, Charlie Higson. The Offcuts were performed by Shash, Hira, Kenny Blyth, Chris Kent, Keith Wickham, Emma Clarke, Noni Lewis and Nigel Pilkington, and the music was by me. For more details about this episode, visit offcutstraw.com and please do subscribe, rate and review us. Thanks for listening.